Hi, Aqua Roomers. Time for chapter reading. Now, yesterday, they have stopped to camp on the prairie for a couple of days. And this is so funny. Laura and Mary are trying to catch gophers. So Mary was waiting very patiently by a hole. But of course, the gophers weren't fooled. They came up behind her. And Laura is just trying to chase after a gopher. But no, they couldn't be caught. So they got flowers for Ma instead. Ma took the sand iron out of the wagon and heated it by the fire. She sprinkled a dress for Mary and a dress for Laura and a little dress for baby Carrie and her own sprigged calico. She spread a blanket and a sheet on the wagon seat and she ironed the dresses. Baby Carrie slept in the wagon. Laura and Mary and Jack lay in the shady grass beside it because now the sunshine was hot. Jack's mouth was open and his red tongue hung out. His eyes blinked sleepily. Ma hummed softly to herself while the iron smoothed all the wrinkles out of the little dresses. All around them, to the very edge of the world, there was nothing but grasses waving in the wind. Far overhead, a few white puffs of cloud sailed in a thin blue air. So here is a picture of Ma ironing. See, they're in the wagon, and you can tie up the wagon covers to let more air in, and she's ironing. Laura was very happy. The wind sang a low, rustling song in the grass. Grasshoppers rasping quivered up from all the immense prairie. A buzzing came faintly from all of the trees in the creek bottoms, but all these sounds made a great, warm, happy silence. Laura had never seen a place she liked so much as this place. She didn't know she'd gone to sleep until she woke up. Jack was on his feet, wagging his stump tail. The sun was low, and Pa was coming across the prairie. Laura jumped up and ran, and his long shadow stretched to meet her in the waving grasses. He held up the game in his hand for her to see. He had a rabbit, the largest rabbit she'd ever seen, and two plump prairie hens. Laura jumped up and down, clapped her hands, and squealed. Then she caught hold of his other sleeve and hippity-hopped through the tall grasses beside him. "This country's crammed, jammed with game," he told her. "Ooh, I saw 50 deer, if I saw one, and antelope, squirrels, rabbits, birds of all kinds. The creek's full of fish," he said to Ma. "I tell you, Caroline, there's everything we want here. We can live like kings." That was a wonderful supper. They sat by the campfire and ate the tender, savory, flavory meat until they could eat no more. When at last Laura set down her plate, she sighed with contentment. It means she's happy. She didn't want anything more in the whole world. The last color was fading from the enormous sky, and all the level land was shadowy. The warmth of the fire was pleasant because the night wind was cool. Phoebe birds called sadly from the woods down by the creek. For a little while, a mockingbird sang. Then the stars came out and the birds were still. Softly, Pa's fiddle sang in the starlight. Sometimes he sang a little, and sometimes the fiddle sang alone. Sweet and thin and far away, the fiddle went on singing. None knew thee but to love thee, Now, dear one of my heart. The large bright stars hung down from the sky. Lower and lower they came, quivering with music. Laura gasped. Ma came quickly. "What is it, Laura?" she asked. And Laura whispered, "The stars were singing." "You've been asleep," Ma said. "It's only the fiddle, and it's time little girls were in bed." She undressed Laura in the firelight and put her nightgown on and tied her nightcap and tucked her into bed. But the fiddle was still singing in the starlight. The night was full of music, and Laura was sure that part of it came from the great bright stars swinging so low above the prairie. The house on the prairie. My goodness. That's the next chapter. They're still in the wagon. The house on the prairie. Ooh, this is exciting. Laura and Mary were up earlier than the sun. They ate their breakfast of cornmeal mush and prairie hen gravy. I never had that for breakfast. Cornmeal mush and prairie hen gravy. Whew. And they hurried to help Ma with the dishes. Pa was loading everything else into the wagon and hitching up Pet and Patty. When the sun rose, they were driving on across the prairie. There was no road now. Pet and Patty waded through the grass, and the wagon was left behind only the tracks of its wheels. Before noon, Pa said, "Whoa!" The wagon stopped. "Here we are, Caroline," he said. "Right here. We'll build our house." Laura and Mary scrambled over the feed box and dropped to the ground in a hurry. All around them, there was nothing but grassy prairie spreading to the edge of the sky. Quite near them, to the north, the creek bottoms lay below the prairie. Some darker green treetops showed, and beyond them, bits of the rim of earthen bluffs held up the prairie grasses. Far away to the east, a broken line of different greens lay on the prairie, and Pa said that was the river. "That's the Verdigris River," he said, pointing it out to Ma. "Ooh, tomorrow. Ooh, I've got the map book. Tomorrow we will find the Verdigris River, and we'll see where they are. Okay?" "Yes." Right away, he and Ma began to unload the wagon. Ooh, they took out everything, and they piled it on the ground. Then they took off the wagon cover and put it over the pile. Then they even took the wagon box off while Laura and Mary and Jack watched. The wagon had been home for a long time. Now there was nothing left of it but the four wheels and the parts that connected them. So how can I explain this? Okay. So these are the wheels that are underneath. This is the wagon box. So they took everything out of the wagon, and then Pa took the box off where everybody sits and everything is stored, put that on the ground, so the only thing that's left is just the wheels. Pet and Patty were still hitched to the tongue. Pa took a bucket and his axe, and sitting on the skeleton wagon, he drove away. He drove right down into the prairie out of sight. "Where's Pa going?" Laura asked, and Ma said, "He's going to get a load of logs from the creek bottoms." It was strange and frightening to be left without the wagon on the high prairie. The land and the sky seemed too large and Laura felt small. She wanted to hide and be still in the tall grass, like a little prairie chicken. But she didn't. She helped Ma, while Mary sat on the grass and minded baby Carrie. First, Laura and Ma made the beds under the wagon-covered tent. Oh, so when everything came apart, this canvas, this is the cover, they made that into a tent. So all of your things could go into the tent, and the box is gone and holding everything. And then Pa has the wheels with nothing on it. You can go down to the creek bottoms, get logs, pile them on, bring them back. First, Laura and Ma made the beds under the wagon-covered tent. Then Ma arranged the boxes and bundles while Laura pulled all the grass from a space in front of the tent. They made a bare place for the fire. Of course, they couldn't start the fire until Pa brought wood. There was nothing more to do, so Laura explored a little. She did not go far from the tent, but she found a queer little kind of tunnel in the grass. You'd never notice it if you looked across the waving grass tops, but when you came to it, there it was, a narrow, straight, hard path. Down between the grass stems, it went out into the endless prairie. Laura went along it a little way. She went slowly and then more slowly, and then she stood still, and she felt odd. She turned around and came back quickly. When she looked over her shoulder, there wasn't anything there. But she hurried. When Pa came riding back on a load of logs, Laura told him about that path. He said he'd seen it yesterday. It's some old trail, he said. That night by the fire, Laura asked him again when she would see a papoose. But Pa didn't know. He said, you never saw Indians unless they wanted you to see them. He had seen Indians, when he was a boy in New York State. But Laura never had. She knew that they were, she didn't know, she thought that they were wild men with red skins and hatchets that were called tomahawks. Do you see? When you really don't know about somebody, sometimes you think things that really aren't true. Pa knew all about animals, so he must know about these men. Laura thought he would show her a papoose someday, just as he had showed her fawns and little bears and wolves. And were the Indians wild? No. For days, Pa hauled logs. He made 2 piles of them, one for the house and one for the stable. There began to be a road where he drove back and forth to the creek bottoms. And at night, on their picket lines, Pet and Patty ate the grass till it was short and stubby all around the log piles. Pa began the house first. He paced off the sides of it on the ground. Then, with his spade, he dug a shallow little hollow along 2 sides of that space. Into these hollows, he rolled 2 of the biggest logs. They were sound, strong logs because they must hold up the house. They were called sills. Then Pa chose 2 more strong, big logs, and he rolled those logs onto the end of the sills, so they made a hollow square. And now, with his axe, he cut a deep notch near the end of these logs. And look, this is what it looks like. We'll read more about this tomorrow. Bye, boys and girls.